waiting for the server. Did you all just get that? Yes. Okay, great. So I'm just going to wait for a couple more minutes before I bring Holly into the room to start with nutrition. But yeah, I'm very excited. So I will quickly do an introduction to each person. And for the sake of the recording, actually, I'll just say this. For the sake of the recording, I'll just do a spiel about how I want to bridge the gap between women and their own bodies. But I'm not going to do the spiel again for the recording for the sake of the people here live. So if you're watching a recording, hey, you should have been in live. No, I'm joking. It's absolutely fine. But I'm not going to do the spiel again. So I've brought in today Holly Dunn. I always want to call you Holly Dunn Nutrition, but nutrition's not actually your surname. But I say it to everyone. So like, oh, you know how like, you know, everyone off. Victoria, you laugh. I do it with you as well. I'm like, postpartum physio, obviously. You know, when you start calling people by their like Instagram names, I'll tell you a story. I go to I don't think she's in this. Maybe a couple of people in this workshop might know her, but she's not in today. But she's called Lou and she goes to my gym, and her Instagram handle, if you want to go follow her, she posts a lot about CrossFit, is Coffee, Cake and CrossFit. Do you know her, Victoria? Yeah. And once she changed her name to her normal name, and I was like, nah, because in our house she's called Coffee Cake. So like you can't then call yourself Lou on your name, like, no. Anyway, I digress. So Holly, thank you so much for joining us. But Holly is a nutritionist. I have known you for years now through social media, really, wasn't it? And this year started working personally with Holly again to help me bridge the gap between me and my body postpartum. Oh, here's someone. Oh, a couple more people are joining. Hello, if you're just joining, I'm just doing an introduction. I have done blood tests, stool tests, any other tests? Those are the two big ones, aren't they? And I've had regular check-ins with Holly, and she is helping me piece together my body around my thyroid, my hormones, fueling properly and things like that. So when we get Holly in, you will 1000 billion% get so much information from her. This whole workshop as well is I'm going to stop. I could have gone into like the science around like how our bodies work in the 28-day cycle and things like that, but I'm not going to do that. I want to dive straight into each person's specialist, because there's going to be so many nuggets that you guys are going to get from each person. If you do think that would be of interest to you, like if you would want to know how, you know, the 28-day cycle, how each of our estrogen and progesterone and all of that sort of works within our bodies, let me know. You can pop it into the comments, into the chat. Let me know if that would be of interest, because we can always do that. Like another workshop, we could do that. Also, the chat box is open all evening. So whenever someone comes on, if you've got a question, pop it in there. We will either find time at the end of each person's chat to answer those questions, or we'll screenshot them and we'll get those answers to you guys in a follow-up email as well. So we'll just see how we're doing for time, but please keep tracking your questions in there. Quick other final one is Victoria. I will introduce you properly, but Victoria is a women's health physio and does daily reminders of making sure I am working my pelvic floor. Is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to keeping us strong in our bodies. And I'm so excited for you to hear all about like the pelvic floor and the core, and why that's important generally as a female, not just postpartum or when you're pregnant. So Victoria will join us a little bit later, and also Meg Sharland, who is the person that is piecing together my mind. We've dived deep. We've gone deep here in this very room, in this chair. And Megs is going to be sharing with us all about the hypnosis journey that I've been on and the work that she does, and also the importance of our nervous system regulation. It's such a buzzword at the moment, and I know so many of us want to know what the hell nervous system regulation actually is and how we even do it. So Megs will chat to us about that. That will also cover off things like stress and how our mind and our body are connected and will affect us with our hormones. So I'm going to shut up quickly just for a moment and bring Holly into the room. And as I said, any questions that you guys have got, just chuck them into the chat. And Holly, hello.
Should
Oh,
probably unmute myself. Am I?
yeah, unmute
Hello.
yourself. Yeah,
Hello.
yeah, we need you. Hello, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, I've said it lots. I'm very excited. So I obviously touched on briefly how we know each other. Could you give us a little bit more of, I guess, like a clinical background, like a professional background, of who you are for me, please?
Yeah, so I'm a registered nutritional therapist and a registered nutritionist. So they are slightly different. They involve different types of training. So I am both of those things. And my specialism really is hormones, particularly amenorrhea, particularly functional hypothalamic amenorrhea. But as Chloe knows, I work with a really broad spectrum of women, a variety of different hormone conditions, including things like thyroid, stress related ill health, if you like, and just women just generally looking to feel a bit better, like optimize stuff. I hate that word optimize, but I do use it quite a lot, unfortunately. So just, yeah, as I think I love the expression bridge the gap, but perhaps that is quite a nice sort of way to think about a lot of the women that I'm working with, women that just want to understand their bodies better and fuel themselves better, feed themselves better, nourish themselves better.
Yeah, and I think, like, it's a minefield, nutrition, isn't it? There is so much on, especially Instagram, TikTok, and all of that now, whether it's like the latest diets of like keto, or whether you're like down the fitness route, which is like all about protein and things like that.
Yeah.
It can be so overwhelming. And then I feel like, especially if you've been through HA, there's this big chat about eating enough. But even now within menopause, making sure you're eating enough, and then still, like I said, especially through HA, make sure you're eating enough. And even down the fitness route now, there's less around like eat less, eat less. It's now this bit of, again, a bit of a buzzword around eating enough. What does eating enough actually mean? And how on earth, like, what does it mean in relation to our hormones?
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, eating enough simply means, are you getting enough energy from food? Not nutrients, not specialized cofactors and all these sort of sexy words when it comes to nutrition. Are you purely getting enough energy from food to support all of your body functions as well as your lifestyle? So your exercise, mostly your physical demands. And this is the link with the energy availability, which is also, you would have heard of this. This is a sports nutrition term that refers to the amount of dietary energy that's left over once you've accounted for exercise, because it's that energy that is required for your body to function well, for your body to function enough, really.
So is that when, for example, when we would have HA, for example, hypothalamic amenorrhea, our bodies are likely to always prioritize movement, and then once that's all done, what is left in that little bucket? And if there's not much left, is that where we see the missing periods?
Yeah, that's one of the causes. It's one of the primary most common causes of hypothalamic amenorrhea is low energy availability. So this is linked to energy intake and exercise together. There are others. So in this condition, the brain is taking in a thousand pieces of data every millisecond, with regards to, your stress hormones, your glucose levels, hormones that are coming from the gut to tell you how much fat you've eaten or protein you've eaten, your ghrelin levels, your hunger hormone, all sorts of little biochemical inputs that are telling your brain whether or not the environment is appropriate or we have the resources to support reproduction, for example. Yeah.
Okay, and when it comes not just HA, then hormones in general, how do we know that we're eating enough? We
Such
see a lot around, yeah, we see so much around like calorie tracking now and things like that, don't we? Or like particular diets, and I get it all the time. I get a lot of questions around whether it's HA around this whole 2,500 calorie buzzword, but then also people that are trying not to track or have tracked for ages and they don't know how to not track anymore. So
yeah.
could you give us a bit of a lowdown around tracking, and then also how to make sure we are eating enough?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you asked this, because I think when we're talking about eating enough, our mind classically will go to, okay, I need a metric. I need to know, how do I know what's enough? So calories in, calories out becomes that default way to sort of estimate this. But there is, aside from the fact that it's immensely detrimental to your relationship with food to start that process of calculating stuff in, out, um, it's really inaccurate. We know that, so calories in foods are not equal. They're not equal in terms of how they're digested, absorbed, metabolized, and in terms of how full you feel from different types of foods and the energy in those foods. Calorie trackers can be up to 30% inaccurate for calories burned, for example. And when it comes to especially women, we're constantly changing. Our energy requirements are constantly changing, not just to do with exercise, to do with, if you have a menstrual cycle, your energy requirements are changing throughout the month, actually. And if you've been unwell, your environment can influence this. And really interestingly, if you are recovering from HA and you're actively trying to recover, maybe you're trying to change your diet a little bit or eat a bit more, for example, your metabolism is changing. That's called metabolic readaptation. So if you're focusing on a number or a specific range, you can get it wrong. And can you afford to get it wrong? So I think that the answer is challenging, but it is a process of starting to listen to your body. Now, I'm not saying necessarily start to listen to your hunger, because there are a lot of things that can affect your hunger. Stress hormones can positively and negatively affect hunger, but it is about starting to appreciate what's going on in your body and looking out for signs of undereating. So that could be, for example, not sleeping well, chronic fatigue that is just not relieved by rest, getting injured, not recovering well from exercise, performance stagnation if you like to be active, anxiety, like, and overwhelm that just hits you out of nowhere, and you're like, oh my God, I don't really know why this is happening, and maybe it's happening at the same time every day. And so it's little things like that that you can start to be your own detective. Be your own detective, and then you can start to say, okay, well, maybe I should try eating a bit more.
And that can be hard for some people, can't it? Not just in the HA bucket, but also generally as females, we have been swamped by diet culture that basically says eat less and move more. How dare you eat more? So not only are we battling with society, and this is one of the big things is like that I learned, I guess one of the bridges between is how much we actually do need to eat. And we actually probably do need to eat more than what we think we do. But also, am I right in thinking when we eat is also just as important, especially as females?
Yes. And I am so glad you asked this question, because this is missing. When we're talking about hormones, often I see a lot of, we're talking about, how much, eating more and eating enough, which is so good to see. So good to see that. And then we're talking a lot about specialized nutrients and different types of foods, but often when we eat is missing. And I see a lot of women, come to me with the most gorgeous diets. I mean, I can't fault them in a lot of stuff, and not that I would ever do that anyway, but it's often just timing. It's often just timing things. So wherever you are in your hormone journey, whether you have HA or not, you've got a normal hormone cycle, if you're perimenopause, for normal and optimal hormone function, eating enough, regularly enough, and we could say, maybe at the right time, just be careful of those words like right, absolute, those absolute terms, but that's incredibly important, because this can help to regulate your cortisol, your main stress hormone, prevent energy crashes, help to keep your ghrelin, your hunger hormone, at bay. I always think about the old Shreddies advert, if anyone remembers the old Shreddies advert. But keeping that ghrelin hormone in check, because if ghrelin is consistently raised, that is one inhibitor of GnRH in the brain. That's the primary trigger for the sex hormone system. And it can also help to improve your metabolism. It improves your metabolism. It helps bring your body out of an energy conserving state into sort of an active, sort of not a low power mode. You go into a slightly higher power mode. So it is really important. And I think the key takeaways for women, for hormones, are to avoid skipping meals, to eat a little bit earlier than you think you should, especially in the morning, not necessarily in the evening. So again, we can get into trouble if we stop finishing eating at 5 o'clock and then we wonder why we're waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning. But especially in the morning, and sort of structuring your eating around, I know this isn't rocket science, guys, but it's really important, structuring your eating around 3 balanced meals and very likely some snacks, especially if you're active. And are often when, people are having a snack maybe in the afternoon, but not in the morning. So it might just be maybe making that one switch and just seeing what happens. It can be as simple as that.
So what would an ideal, I guess, day look like for someone? And let's say they're active as well. So when you talk about timings around food, let's say they train first thing in the morning, what would an ideal of just consumption of food look like?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to do this because, again, it might depend on so many personal factors about the type of training, the duration, how they feel the night before, what their kind of composition of the meals are like, and blah, 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 blah.
But isn't this like that answer is an answer in itself, right? In that we are so shown so many what I eat in a day, and we're shown so many things, but there's so many components that play a role in what your food should look like. So if you're following blanket diet plans, it's not necessarily going to be helpful for you.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that we've highlighted this because, again, those what I eat in a day, I think they can be, quite concerning, really.
But really we want to avoid that fast, right? As females.
Yeah, if you wake up in a fasted state, so you're in an energy deficit at that point. If you wake up if you imagine for optimal hormone function, you want to be in a state of energy balance. So this is complex. It's kind of, relatively speaking, across the day. You're waking up in an energy deficit, and if you imagine you want to get to balance as soon as possible. So you have breakfast, you get one step closer. You have lunch, you get one step closer. You might have a snack. You've reached energy balance. And then in the evening, you go into a positive energy balance. That's normal, right? You have more energy than so you're going to store some. You need to store energy. It's really important you do that. And then you cycle back down into an energy deficit. So, and you're constantly going around energy balance all the time. So for somebody who is struggling with their hormones, chronically fatigued, possibly, trying to recover their period postpartum, HA, whatever it might be, the sooner you can kind of get to energy balance, the better. It doesn't mean waking up and eating, like your whole daily food intake, but it does mean allowing yourself, and possibly this is the key, is just allowing yourself to have a little bit more in the morning. I think we are conditioned to do the opposite.
Yeah, and maybe Jasmine, that might have answered your question where her question relates to fasting as a habit. Um, so I guess it is just making sure like it's important for females to make sure that we're closing that gap early on, right?
Yeah, and if you're very active, I don't want to sort of drop names in here too much. I have no affiliations with any other professional, and I always have love and also some reservations about certain things that people say. But there are other professionals that talk a lot about, if you're worried about intermittent fasting and you think, but I've seen all of this stuff on autophagy and all this stuff and it's good for female health and stuff, go and listen to Stacey Sims, there's a whole load of people that have done a lot of work on this, that hopefully, if I can't convince you that it might not be the right thing for you, then she might be able to do that. Not that I am trying to convince anyone to do anything exactly.
Holly, I love it. I feel like this how Holly's talking now. I'll be sat here and I'm like, so like, should I do this? And she's like, no, Chloe, like I'm not going, I'm not going. And
I
I'm like
don't tell
trying to,
you.
I want absolute
I
answers.
don't know.
I'm
Yeah.
like a type A person that like
Yeah.
wants a tick box. And Holly is just like, not like, she's like, no, we don't work in absolutes, Chloe. You know this now. And I'm like, damn it. So okay, so we're not working with absolutes. I'm aware of that. But what are some of the key ingredients or nutrients that we should focus, especially as females, in adding into our diets daily?
So this subject, honestly, I could write a book on it. So I'm not going to be able to touch on everything. So what I've
Maybe
decided
you
to
should.
do, huh?
Maybe you should.
Well, yes, so I've been, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Tell me how I'm going to find the time to do this. So basically, there's a lot here, and not everything I touch on here is going to be relevant to all of you here. So I may miss the mark for some of you, and I apologize for that. But I'm going to try and focus on firstly some of the big food categories. So when it comes to some of the big food categories, carbohydrates, they're the unsexy, unsung hero of nutrition. And really interestingly, if you go and look online, right, on any hormone balancing diet, they don't really feature. You know, we're so focused on protein and fat and fiber, and carbohydrates are just sort of missing in action. And I think this goes hand in hand with the rise of blood sugar balance obsession, which absolutely as a nutritional professional is really important. And I'm always making sure women have got enough protein, and I'm always thinking about getting enough fiber. All of those things are immensely important, but we're getting lost in types of diets that are actually more appropriate for somebody clinically with epilepsy or diabetes, and we're not really treating or caring for the active woman or just the regular woman. So carbohydrates are really important. They have an immense role to play in hormone regulation. Put really, really crudely, your brain and your ovaries use a lot of glucose, and that's the structural building block for carbohydrates.
And sorry to jump in, because I'm right in thinking that you can lose your period or create a lot of stress in the body just off low carbohydrate availability as well, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, so I've got an interesting client that I remember very, very well, who on paper, would look really, it would be, well, why does she not have a period? But if you look closely, the types of carbohydrates that she was choosing, were all very high cell wall. That's an expression that's I've heard others use as well now. So high cell wall, so high fiber, so very, very high fiber. So high fiber is great for your gut. So I'm not saying don't include fiber-rich complex carbohydrates. Please do include those, really important for your health. But virtually no, I'm not going to say simpler carbohydrates, but more digestible carbohydrates, things that actually, again, in the context of high exercise load, are sending signals to the brain. Glucose, insulin, actually really important signals in HA. Insulin and glucose, average levels of your blood glucose and your insulin levels are typically on the low side. So we know there's some relationship there between actually having a blood sugar spike after a meal, which we're all terrified of, thanks to she who must not be named. So it is, it's a balancing act. If you've got protein in the meal, if you've got fat in the meal, and you've got some lovely sort of fiber-rich vegetables or whatever in the meal, you do not need to worry about some blooming rice or bread or pasta. And if that scares you, then you can start slowly with incorporating brown rice or black rice or whatever, just being really crude here with different examples. And it's different types of carbohydrates have a different value. You know this, in terms of the variety of foods that you choose in terms of your gut microbiome and all that sort of stuff. So
I
variety
guess you're taught
for
to
everyone.
like eat the rainbow in school, but it's literally is that simple, isn't it? As well, is like creating that diversity. I remember back in my like fitness days, I would class sweet corn as my carbohydrate. And girls, we all know what happens with sweet corn, don't we?
Exactly.
Do you know that is what I'd be like, look at me eating carbs. I mean, I eat so many carbs. I eat corn on the cob all the time. But actually, fundamentally, that's not really giving me the energy that I need to
But
be
also,
able to sustain.
but also, if sweet corn is one of the only carbohydrates you have, again, it's nutrient rotation as well. You know, we know that our guts are happy when they've got a variety of different types of fibers. Our brains are happy when we've got a variety of different nutrients coming in. You know, if you're eating the same foods over and over again, you're shortchanging yourself in terms of your access to nutrients.
So, if we were going to say then for happy hormones, actually, no, let me change that to like maybe more let's less PMS, a more calmer, go with the flow cycle. Are there any real things that we should be ensuring that we eat? So making sure we eat regularly, you said, and also eating in the morning there and having carbohydrates. Is there anything else that we should really grab? I was
So
about to say grab by the balls, but
what you've just, I mean, I kind of want to give fats and proteins a little bit of airtime, so I will do that in a minute. But actually, what you've just said,
I was just going to say sorry. I feel like I've done.
no, no. You've actually just said something quite interesting. So you've said, is there anything that can help smooth our ride with hormones if we have a menstrual cycle? And there's lots of things. I mean, so calcium is important, magnesium is important. It's one of the few times I actually say all this hype about B6 is valuable. B6 not so valuable if you have HA. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just not going to do much for you. There's a reason for that. I can touch on that if you want to. But what you're basically saying is what you're basically saying is you've just basically asked me, is there such a thing as a phytoestrogen? And there is. And this is a group of compounds found in plants that are structurally similar to estrogen. So they can exert a weak estrogenic effect. So it's really, really interesting because
does that mean, sorry to jump in, but that means in my terms, a smoother ride?
Yes, it does. So if you've got low estrogen, so they've been highly studied in perimenopause or postmenopause. So if you have low estrogen, they can tag weakly onto receptors and exert a weak estrogenic effect. So it can actually give you a sense of estrogen. And if you have high estrogen, they can block those receptors a little bit. So the more active, more biologically active estrogens that you have aren't as powerful. So they're adaptogenic in this way. That means they can help with high and low symptoms of high and low estrogen. So good for PMS. They are found in soy products. So
Everyone get your pens ready.
Yes, soy products, ground flax seeds, not whole flax seeds, ground flax seeds, other legumes, so soybeans are legumes, so other beans and pulses, and some seeds in lower concentrations like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, and sesame seeds. The interesting thing is that unfortunately, not all women gain a benefit from these. And that's because the activation of these phytoestrogens happens in the gut, and not all of us have the gut bacteria to do that. So you won't know unless you try. And we believe that between 2 and 3 servings a day is where the magic happens. So if you've got a tiny sprinkle of ground flaxseed on your breakfast, you might not really get any effect from this.
I feel like you just outed me. January 2025, Chloe, you just outed me. I used on our first call, wasn't it? I was like, yeah, and I put flaxseed on my yogurt, and I was like, yeah, look at me go. And Holly was like, how much? And I was like, a sprinkle. She was like, no, you need a tablespoon. I was like, oh, no worries.
There's nothing wrong with the sprinkle, because there's something in there. You get a little bit of omega-3, you get a little bit more fiber. Of course, there's going to be something in there. But if you're talking about getting a clinical effect that we've seen in research, you need to go up a gear a little bit with that.
Yeah, and I guess like Lidl and Aldi is where I get my ground flaxseed from, and it's Lidl and Aldi prices. I get my chia seeds and my flax seeds, ground flax seeds there. So if you don't have them and you want to start having them, Lidl and Aldi are really good cheap places for you to grab them from.
Yeah, and you can keep them in the fridge when they're open as well, if they're ground.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, it preserves the oil, so that once, as soon as you've broken the structure of the seed, those oils are actually quite, those polyunsaturated oils are actually quite delicate, so they're more prone to oxidation. So I put them straight in the fridge, dark, cool, very cold, keep them cold. Yeah.
Okay,
As soon
that's
as
good
they're
to know.
open, obviously, if you keep them in the larder until they're, or in the larder, I don't have a larder, but if you have a larder, if you've got a larder, keep them out in a cupboard and then put them in the
Okay,
next when they're open.
fab. Thank you. You wanted to touch on proteins and fats, right?
Yeah, I just don't want to exclude. I mean, they are still really incredibly important. So both proteins and fats provide structural building blocks for hormones. So fats provide things like cholesterol and fatty acids, which support steroid hormone production. So things like estrogen and progesterone, and your proteins provide peptide building blocks to make things like pituitary hormones, thyroid hormones, insulin. So they're both important for hormones technically, and all sorts of other reasons why as well. Fats, incredibly important to help you absorb hormone critical nutrients like vitamin A and vitamin D. This is really important because if you don't have enough fat in your meal, then you're missing out. Like if you've got this beautiful salad, like all of these wonderful polyphenols and carotenoids, all fat soluble nutrients, you don't, and you're just gonna just add, I know people have done this as well, and people that I've worked with, just add the vinegar, no fat to it, just trying to save on a few calories. Yeah, we've all been guilty of that. Look, many years ago. Yeah, sure, I know it happens. But you're not getting that benefit from those nutrients. Maybe getting fiber, but you're not getting benefit from a lot of the nutrients in that.
And you also said to me around swapping the 0% fat yogurt for
Okay,
the
this is
good
big.
stuff.
This is big. Now, by all means, when it comes to full fat dairy and 0% fat dairy, by all means, have 0% yogurt before you go to exercise. It's actually really good pre-exercise. I enjoy that if I'm going to do exercise, some 0% with something like banana and other stuff in it. But the rest of the time, or at least some other of the time, don't discount full fat dairy. Now, if you don't enjoy dairy and you don't tolerate dairy, forget it. Don't worry about it. No issue. But there is a benefit to full fat dairy. Research consistently shows a link between full fat dairy and a lower risk of anovulatory infertility. So this is where you're not ovulating, and you obviously can't get pregnant if you're not ovulating. And the opposite is true for low fat dairy. The higher intake of low fat dairy, the increased risk of anovulatory infertility. Full fat dairy is where the magic happens in terms of vitamin A, a really important nutrient for your hormones. There's lots of vitamin A in plants, but some people are very poor converters of vitamin A into the active form, which is really important for follicle development, steroid hormone production, thyroid function, the activity of vitamin D. So the only active sources of active preformed vitamin A are actually oily fish, full fat dairy, egg yolks in small amounts, and liver. Now, I don't know about you, but not many people I know do eat liver. I sometimes bring it up in client consultations, say, is an option for you, and usually gets shut down straight away. And also, if you're trying to have a baby, please don't go anywhere near liver. It's not the time to enjoy liver if you are trying to conceive. But that's actually not very, that's actually only 4 categories of foods. So if you're going for low fat dairy every time and you don't have any oily fish in your diet, and maybe you have 2-3 eggs a week, and you've got a genetic SNP, which means all of the lovely plant vitamin A, which there is in dark green leafy vegetables, butternut squash, sweet potatoes, carrots, lots of lovely carotenoids in these foods. You may be a slow converter. You could be struggling with this really important fertility nutrient. So I do see that quite a lot, and I'm always trying to just plug the gap in with some of my clients on that, just to make sure.
And would plugging that gap look like a supplement? I think I've teed you nicely up there for a bit of magnesium chat.
Magnesium alpha. So there are certain things that it's important to supplement especially if you're trying to conceive. So folate is very important. So you can easily see on a blood test with folate if you are safe to conceive or not.
Is folate just as important if you're not trying? So maybe you're just trying to get your period back, or just as females with hormones anyway.
Really good question. Yes, so folate is actually involved in helping your ovaries respond to pituitary hormones. So things like LH and FSH. LH is the trigger for ovulation. FSH helps the follicles helps them develop. So yes, irrespective of whether you're trying to have a baby or not, folate is good for your menstrual cycle, whoever you are. It has a unique role in preconception in terms of keeping the early stages of conception and the embryogenesis safe, which is kind of separate to that. So folate, really important. Vitamin D, really important because there's very little in food. It's a hormone, actually, vitamin D, and we make it when we're exposed to sunshine. In this country, in this sort of level, this hemisphere, we will struggle to get in vitamin D. Everyone actually should be taking a vitamin D supplement between October and March in this country. So government guidelines stipulate 400 international units. A lot of people will need more. As it is a fat soluble vitamin, you can overdose on it. So it's always good to test in the blood. So vitamin D, very important for hormones, hormone regulation, menstrual cycle function as well. If you've got painful periods, vitamin D also can help regulate prostaglandin release, which is linked to painful periods. So it's one of those important nutrients to look at if you have very painful periods. And magnesium. The go-to magnesium.
Yeah.
So magnesium is like become, I think it's big business. It's a bit like, you know, gluten-free. It's a bit like it's a big business.
The amount of supplement brands
Yeah.
I get asked and get emailed about or DM'd, and bear in mind, look, I've got under 10,000 followers, let alone imagine what like the big guys get. And it's constantly, do you want to try my magnesium supplement? Magnesium, magnesium, magnesium.
Yeah. And look, there are all sorts of different forms of magnesium. Your choice is based on what's going on for you. Like if you've got really, really bad, I don't know, constipation, arguably I would not be looking to use magnesium to help with constipation. I'd want to look at why you're constipated and look at your diet. But, you know, you might want a little bit of help there. So you might find citrate or even glycinate helpful. If you've got really bad muscle sores or you fibromyalgia, there's a small amount of research that magnesium malate is helpful there. Taurine, possibly for digestive issues. But again, most of the clinical research on these forms of magnesium, with the exception of glycinate, which is just a little bit ahead of the pack, is pretty sparse, with the exception of this form of magnesium, it's magnesium L-threonate, which not many people are using or know about yet, but I think in the next year or two, I think this is going to explode, because the clinical research on it is really impressive. And there's clinical research means human studies, not animal studies, not other research. So it's actually really impressive. And what's so special about magnesium L-threonate is that it has the greatest clinical efficacy for anxiety, brain function. If you've got HA, it's actually a brain condition. It's a nervous system condition rather than necessarily a hormone condition. And sleep quality. And it's the only form of magnesium that can efficiently cross the blood-brain barrier. So your brain is encased in a barrier. It's highly protected, keep toxins out, keep anything out that we don't want to get in there. Only allows little gateways that are in your blood-brain barrier that only allow special things through. And magnesium L-threonate can get into the brain and central nervous system. That's not scary, it's a good thing, because it actually helps to raise magnesium levels in your brain and actually calm your central nervous system down. Now, anyone that's actually taken other form of magnesium and then switched to magnesium L-threonate, had a client email me about this on Monday. She said, oh my God, my sleep. Like, it's different. It creates a change. And I use it myself, so I'm not just saying this. It really does have an effect on, you know, your nervous system, etc. It's quite an expensive form of magnesium. There's a patented formula called Magtine that has been used in randomized controlled trials. So obviously it's patented, so they can charge for it. They can escalate their prices. So if you want it, yeah, you do have to pay a bit more for it. but it's good. It works.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Welcome.
I'm conscious of time,
Absolutely.
but just looking
I'm
in the quick chat, I'm just going to try and collate the few questions. One, what's your thoughts on HRT to get periods back?
So HRT won't help you get your periods back, but really powerful and important if you have if your periods have been missing for a year or more, especially if you're in your 20s, you know, that time when, you know, you really want to be accruing bone density. I'd encourage you just to minimize bone loss, and to give you it can give you a lot of symptom relief as well. Some people do respond quite badly to it, actually. So just have an open conversation with your doctor, keep the lines of communication open. Don't worry, you just may need to have your dose adjusted just to get it just spot on and right for you. Because if you haven't had periods for a while, your tissues are going to be really sensitive to your hormones. Your body's shut the system down for a reason. So your body's going to be very sensitive to those hormones. So just go slowly with it, talk to your doctor about it. But it
Okay,
doesn't
so
switch the system on. It doesn't switch the system.
right, okay. So could that explain why someone might be getting energy crashes and sugar cravings and things like that? Maybe their dosage needs to be a little bit looked at.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, low estrogen can cause blood sugar crashes. It helps you get blood glucose.
Yeah. So that was another question and we don't have enough time to go into the negative side effects of HA recovery, but I'm with you. I see you. I've been through it. I understand it. It's not all sunshine and roses. You think that when you're eating more, you're suddenly going to feel amazing, but you don't. And there are energy crashes. Can we just literally 30 seconds just touch on
So,
why we feel that?
yeah, I mean, there's multiple reasons for that, possibly. I mean, often what we see in HA is a lot of stress hormones are really high. So cortisol levels are deregulated and they are excessively high. That can actually make your cells a little bit insulin resistant. So this means that the cells don't suck the glucose in as efficiently. So you're eating something and it's just not getting into the cell, and then things are getting a bit wonky. This is, again, your body's doing that for a reason. It's trying to keep your blood glucose, trying to keep your blood glucose, your levels higher. So, you know, that blood glucose levels can reach the brain. They can reach really vital organs that really need the blood glucose level. So it's stopping it get into some of the other body cells. So again, this can really cause this sense of deregulation. And then the estrogen as well. Estrogen helps you, also has an insulin sensitizing effect. So this is actually all to do with blood glucose. So this is very, very relevant if you are experiencing that. So again, balance your meals. Nothing too radical. Don't exclude the carbohydrates. Have them. You've got to have them there. Protein, yes. Fats, really important. And possibly smaller, more frequent meals, just to give yourself, you know, if you're loading one large meal in the day or two later, smaller, more frequent meals can really help too.
Amazing. Holly, thank you so much. Mimi, on that question, I will do a bigger video on that as well. We've just had another question come in, but I'm going to leave the questions there. I said that I could chat to all three of you for 3 hours, but I will leave them. But guys, if you have any other questions, Holly, keep putting them in the chat, and we will get the answers over to you some way or the other, probably via email, or maybe we can do videos or Holly, thank you so much. I've made loads of notes, as I always do when I chat to you, but it's been incredible, but also opened up a whole other load of questions that we've probably all got. But where can people find you if they've got personal questions and maybe want to explore how they can work with you?
Yeah, so my website is easy, so that's hollydunn.co.uk. Not com. .com is a now sadly deceased Western singer, hollydunn.com. That's not me. I'm co.uk. My email is also hello@hollydunn.co.uk. And Instagram Hollydunn Nutrition. That's me.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Holly. If you want to stick around, you're more than welcome to. But I'm now going to bring into the room Victoria, who I know that some of you have found this workshop through Victoria's page, because a lot of people Victoria had on the when they're signing up and they answered the question. There was lots for you. But hello, thank you so much for joining us and finding time in your crazy busy life with the kids and juggling work as well.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here. It's nice to have someone else do bedtime. So it's good.
Yeah. Hey, maybe we should do these more often. So you... Sorry, and yeah, suddenly it's a weekly thing. We're like, oh yeah, we always do workshops every Wednesday now. Yeah. Can you also do a little bit of a professional intro for me, please?
So I'm Victoria and I'm the postpartum physio. So I specialise in pelvic health, predominantly women's health. And that's everybody from sort of age, my client base at the moment spans from 17 to up to 75. So it's not just, I think lots of people, because of my name, the postpartum physio, they're like, oh, well, it's, just for the baby section. But actually, I'm the postpartum physio. So I started writing my blog, The Postpartum Physio, when I was postpartum and a physio. So it gets a bit confusing, but that's how I kind of generate.
Okay, it makes sense. Yeah.
And so it's actually, I see everybody kind of perimenopause, postmenopause, everywhere in between, young ladies that are struggling, having painful sex, or everyone kind of, as I said, right from kind of 17 right the way up to 75-ish is my case at the moment.
So you mentioned there about painful sex as well. So how important is our pelvic floor and our core? Because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't have associated necessarily painful sex associated to our pelvic floor. I might have thought maybe hormonal, like people experience like dryness, but I'd assume that could be pelvic floor as well then.
Yeah, and this is why our work as pelvic health physios is so important, because our pelvic floor and our core in general, it's literally, like, I always think core like apple core. It's literally the middle of us. It's the center of us, and it's so important. And the pelvic floor, here she is, it's made up of so many small intricate muscles, and it's literally the base of our core. We have the diaphragm at the top, abdominals, kind of obliques that kind of at the front and kind of sides, and then our back muscles. So it works as this literal powerhouse cylinder. And our pelvic floor is responsible for so much. So it's responsible for, obviously, like babies out potentially. It's responsible for kind of sex, supporting our spine, supporting our internal organs, going for a wee, going for a poo. It's so, like, I think people forget how important it is. And for me, when kind of people come into clinic with symptoms and things, it's when I sort of start talking about, like, can you tell me about your stool? Like, how often are you going to the toilet? And like, people kind of say, is this really? And I'm like, it's so important.
Yeah, and you said there about like forget the importance.
Yeah.
I don't think I was ever taught the importance.
No.
I think I was literally just maybe around pregnancy, and when people would joke at me and say, "Oh, how I'm going to piss myself all the time now."
Yes, and that is, and if we could, like, it's my mission to try and change that narrative, because people are talking about it, but what they're talking about it in a sense of like lol, and it's really funny, and that's the only option. And actually, it should be talking about it as in, like, that when I first went to do double unders after I had my first baby, it happened to me. Actually, I was out for a dog walk, and I wrote my first blog post on it because I was so mortified. I was out on a dog walk and I had to run because Louis had run after a cat or something, and I did leak, and I was so upset, and there wasn't any funniness about it. And I was like, I remember coming home and having to have a shower and just crying in the shower and feeling so isolated and alone, but knowing that I had to get this right. I had to look more into what was happening and think about the reasons why around my birth I was having these experiences. And I think there's so much mystery, and it's because it's a bit of a, we don't talk about down there. It's a bit of a shame thing. It's dirty. We don't use those words. And actually, I think we are changing that now as kind of a generation of women that are having our babies. I'm getting so many women come into me now and saying, God, I knew nothing about this. I'm so sad. No one could help me. Nobody spoke to me about this. And they're coming through to me now as ladies in their 70s.
Yeah, that's wild, isn't it? And I guess like, yeah, I think the first time I heard about it was around having a baby, but it is so important pre all of that, isn't it? And it's not, you don't just necessarily get signs. So could you talk me through some of the reasons or signs and symptoms that people are experiencing, maybe at the early age and then all the way up to the older age? Because it's not just postpartum, is it?
No, no, not at all. So it's things like I get lots of ladies that come into me. Normally it's CrossFit because it's the double under effect.
Well, quite. That is literally so many people. I think I only really researched what a mummy MOT was because I did CrossFit. And because, yeah, we do double unders in CrossFit and people were sick to death of wetting themselves on the gym floor.
Yeah, it's a really highly challenging movement. And when you think about it, double under, so it's repeated kind of, obviously the rope's going over you twice and you're skipping for people that aren't.
Yeah, yeah, for people that don't know, it's the double under
Yeah,
skipping.
and it's incredibly high impact, and you've got to have so much coordination in the pelvic floor. You've got to have the ability to relax, contract. You've got to have power. You've got to have endurance, and you've got to have flexibility, withstanding gravity, ground reaction forces. You know, it's very similar to when I go to somewhere like iBounce, and I'll like stand on the side at iBounce, and I'll just observe for like the first 10 minutes, and I kind of want to go over and be like, I know why you're not doing this. That's cool, but we need to be doing it because you're going to get really frustrated with this because you're going to want to do this with your children. You're going to want to be able to run after your kids. Lots of ladies will say it's multi-directional. So even before they've had kind of children and things, they'll step off a curb or they'll sneeze or they'll cough and they'll leak. Or we get ladies coming in saying that they're having painful sex as well, and that can be to do with, yes, very much hormones and kind of the vaginal tissues, and that can change again throughout kind of life, more so around perimenopause and after we've had our babies. But we can be having painful sex for a very different reason around kind of there's a real buzzword around hypertonia and kind of a tight pelvic floor. So there are lots of reasons. I get lots of ladies that come in with back pain as well, and they're looking at their core and how their core is kind of firing or not firing. We're looking at kind of glutes as well, and kind of lower back. So it's kind of pelvic health. I think people think it's just to do with babies, and actually it's in everything we do. You know, it's so key to our life in general.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess like core is a big focus for women, isn't it? Diet culture loves to rip us apart for core, doesn't it?
It does. And I understand because women will come into me and they will be talking from an aesthetic perspective, and I get it. Like, I've had two babies. I completely get it. And I was a long time ago. I used to be a swimmer, so I spent a lot of time not wearing very many clothes, and being very conscious of my core and how I look and how I stand. And I see it more and more that ladies are coming into clinic completely kind of irrespective of babies, and they'll be kind of really struggling with connecting to their core or having an awareness around their core, specifically their breath, and the ability to take a deep breath and relax their core, relax their pelvic floor, because all we want to do is make ourselves very small, very like as small as humanly possible. And that also includes and sometimes it's not essentially a conscious process. Sometimes it's a subconscious process of breath holding, of not taking deep breaths, being exposed to mass stress, that we're not taking these breaths. And our pelvic floor and our diaphragm, when we're breathing in and the diaphragm is moving down and air's coming into the lungs, the pelvic floor actually moves down as well and relaxes. And then when we breathe out, the pelvic floor actually comes back up and contracts a little bit. So it's moving with every single breath you take, it moves. And of course, if we're restricting that breath, so if we're very stressed and we're kind of not breathing, we're breathing from the upper APCs and we're not breathing from the lower lobes of the lung, that pelvic floor is going to become more and more stuck, if you like. And add a bit of stress in there, like long-term stress can have a huge influence on our pelvic floor and how it moves.
And what would that, how would that show up in our pelvic floor? Would that be the tightness?
That could be the tightness, and it doesn't always. So sometimes people can have tightness and it can be kind of related to their hips, or it can be related to, so if we're kind of exercising and not, I always kind of ask if people stretch. Nobody escapes clinic without a stretch. So stretch is important, breath in stretch is important. They're kind of two separate things. Sometimes I think we always love a bit of a stretch and a chat if we're in the gym. But actually the ability to stretch into a pose and then to draw the breath, to use the breath to lengthen is super important. And again, we're bringing awareness to this is moving, diaphragm's moving, pelvic floor is moving. I can feel things coming lower and then things raising up again, and that movement. And that's very often forgotten about, I think, with kind of tight pelvic floor, the movement that we can elicit ourselves.
So how should we be breathing?
Well, and I'm not a little bit outside my lane, but so I always look at, when I'm in clinic, I look at the ability to do a 360-degree breath. So we're breathing in, if we're putting our hands around our lower lobes of our lungs, so like our lower ribs, when we're breathing in, we want to be breathing into our hands. So they're coming out like bucket handles, and then breathing out, and then the ribs are kind of coming back in again. Okay, we want to be trying to do this whilst we're relaxing our tummy. So we're not holding our tummy at all. We're letting it move with the breath.
Right. Does anyone else? I feel like when I first learnt this, I realised I've been breathing wrong for so long.
And that's a really difficult thing, because we don't, essentially, like, I'm in clinic very conscious of being like, that's completely wrong, because it's right for us. We've been doing what we've been doing. And it's just kind of looking at how it affects you, because lots of people breathe, like some people will reverse breathe, some people will kind of hold.
I think that's what I did. I think I reversed breathe. So when I was breathing out, I imagined, is it when I I don't know what I was doing now, but I remember learning, wait, hang on a second, so is it when I breathe in, my stomach should go bigger?
Yeah.
Right, I was doing opposite, and I was like, what do you mean my stomach should go bigger when I'm breathing in? Obviously it makes sense because I'm taking in air.
Yeah, but we're not taught, again, the same way we're not really taught how to have a wee or how to have a poo, except push, which is not helpful. So it's all these things like breathing, we're not taught how to do it.
So that leads me on to, how should I be weeing and pooing?
So super important. We want to try our best. The thing we need to avoid the most at kind of all costs is actively pushing. Okay, and I know it's very difficult because some people will experience constipation where they feel they have to push. I would always suggest waiting until you have the urge to go to the toilet, to have bowels opened, or to have a wee, and trying your best not to avoid it. And it's so difficult because there are all sorts of people in jobs all over the country where actually they're in a class full of like 36-year-olds, and they can't be like, sorry guys, need a wee, see you later, amuse yourselves. So it's as best we can honoring the body and what it's trying to tell us. So much of my job is listening to what the body is telling us. So it's honoring the body and going when we kind of need to. Optimizing our toilet position, so having our knee slightly higher than our hips. So I always say to shove a loo roll or 2 loo rolls under each foot is really helpful because it opens up the neck of our bowel, which sits at a bit of a kink. It's like a kinked off tube of toothpaste. If we can do that, that really helps the transit of the stool, basically. And as best we can, trying to take nice deep breaths, slight forward lean, and kind of, it's the R word that some people, if we find it hard to relax and then someone says, just relax, ridiculous. It's finding, and then this is where in clinic we work to find prompts and cues that work for someone. So that could be imagining, another classic is kind of imagining a flower opening, or imagine, you get when you well, I don't do it, but I can imagine it. So making clay pots on a potter's wheel, and,
Okay, yeah.
and the wheel opening and like the pottery opening. So that relaxing, we're imagining the anal sphincter relaxing, or imagining kind of chocolate melting is another one to help us relax. There are some really good resources on YouTube. Moo to poo is a really good one. If we're
Brilliant.
I always say if we're in corridors, because again, I work with like lots of nurses I work with, and I'll be like, oh yeah, the corridor's here, the toilet's here. I don't think me mooing is going to go down too well. So I would always say, I get it. Blowing bubbles to poo. So imagining that you've got like a whole audience of 3-year-olds and you are using that breath you use to blow bubbles. So again, the breath is so important and so influential over our pelvic floor.
So interesting. So are there any, say, I know you always share on your Instagram and remind us to do our pelvic floor. I guess there's 2 questions here. How do we do our pelvic floor? And then also 1 to 2 daily. No, let's do that one, and then I'll come on to the how do we do our pelvic floor?
So again, it won't be right for everyone, because some people, I'd say if I see 8 people in a day, maybe 1 or 2 of them, we won't need to do pelvic floor. We'll need to do some relaxation, which was the stretching, the breath work we talked about before we come on to looking at if we need to strengthen or what's going on. But the classic way I teach pelvic floor exercises is basically imagining you have a blueberry in your back passage. So your anal sphincter muscle, it's kind of a 2-way way of doing it. So I always say to imagine it's the same muscle that you would use to stop wind. Okay, so you're sat next to, I don't know, Zac Efron, and like you had a massive curry the night before and it's just not going very well. Things don't feel so great. And so you want to draw up that muscle. So imagine that blueberry's in your back passage and you are picking up that blueberry and you are pulling that blueberry up. So you're pulling that blueberry up towards your belly button, which is the classic. I find it easier to teach this in clinic because it replaces the zipping front to back, which everyone's like, what? So I use that.
Yeah, I've got the blueberry, but I've got that blueberry right now, but I don't have the zip. There's no zip down there, but I can pick up a blueberry, no worries.
It is. It's the picking up of that blueberry that's super important. And again, if people are struggling with that, and there can be all manner of reasons, because you can have tightness on one side. So when we're looking at the pelvic floor, we can have one side that could be a little bit tighter than the other. It's like having a left and right bicep, except obviously they're attached onto the same bony landmarks here. They're not. We've got two arms, but we can get tightness and tension on one side. So actually, some people may come into me and say, you know, I can squeeze, I can't lift. I'm finding it really difficult to get that lift. What we need to do is to relax off one side before we can get it to lift again. But that's essentially kind of the most effective way of teaching a pelvic floor exercise. And I will examine ladies internally as I'm getting them to use different prompts, because I have several other ones that I use, to see the best contraction that we can get for the person.
Okay, yeah, I do. When you first told me about the blueberry pickup, that was the light switch for me, because I was like, why am I going to zip up my bum?
And that's
Whereas
people think they're going to zip up from their anus to their kind of urethra externally, and some people will use a lift as well. But the danger with lifts, I get quite a lot of people that come in and say, well, I imagine a lift, and I can tell they've been taught to use a lift as in like an elevator, because they'll be like first floor, second floor, third floor, and it'll be really like they'll stop off at different floors. Be right the way up, and I'll say, have you been taught to use like a lift or an elevator? Like, yeah, how can you tell?
yeah.
Just stopping 3 different floors. It's very impressive, but we want that power. We need that power.
Okay, yeah.
Stand jumping on trampolines. We want to be able to step off a curb awkwardly or cough or sneeze, and for there to be no symptoms.
Okay, so if someone was coming to at any stage, and you might say to me they'll be different for postpartum, for younger people, for older people, that you might say that there's different ones, but if you could give 1 to 2 daily recommendations that we should all be doing to help our pelvic floor and our core, what would you say they were?
It would be to really look at, if you experience, so optimize the way you have your bowels opened. Super important. So important. From it tells us a lot about what's going on. So if we've been struggling for a long time, obviously there's a big nutritional aspect, and I was rushing out to put my ground flax seeds in my fridge a minute ago. Oh my god, I don't keep mine in my fridge. So there's a huge nutritional component that I literally, like, dust on. It's that we talk about insoluble and soluble fibers and the different types and how that can help. I'd always refer on because that's not kind of my lane. But as best we can, I'm looking at the biomechanical reason of why we may struggle to have bowels opened. So as best we can, looking at the toileting position. So a loo roll under the feet is chef's kiss. We want to be optimizing toileting position. And taking just shy of obviously doing our pelvic floor exercises, so maybe 2.5 points. Do your pelvic floor exercises or use the breath to do your pelvic floor, and be aware of, can I do them? And if we can't, we need to have a chat about that. But the breath is so important. It's so, so important because, again, I'm sure Meg's obviously going to talk about nervous system regulation, and that to me is so interesting. But when I'm in clinic, I ask people to take a deep breath. I have some ladies that come in with really good pelvic floor strength. Almost every single person, when I ask them to take a deep breath, they go, okay. And I'll be like, lovely, what have our shoulders got to do with this then? Oh yeah. And it's society, we're all very stressed. We've got a lot going on. We're trying to stay hydrated, do all these things, go to the gym, like have amazing hair and stuff. There's a lot happening. We're working hard, we're doing everything. And what we're not doing is taking those breaths, and it's having quite an effect on our pelvic floors potentially.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that you talk on stress, because whether you are suffering from hypothalamic amenorrhea, whether you are postpartum, going through perimenopause, or like someone that menstruates, living life in 2025, stress is everywhere, whether that's micro stresses or the big stresses. And I think we often forget that, take hypothalamic amenorrhea, there's so much stress in your body right now that your brain is saying, too much stress, we're going to need to shut down certain functions in the body that we don't quite need to stay alive. And I think we then forget that, like, then add in lifestyle stress, and on top of that, and then we're walking around all bunched up like this, and that's also affecting us. And I think I'd never want this workshop to overwhelm more people, to be like, oh god, now I walk around with my shoulders, or like, yeah, like now I've got to sort out my pelvic floor. That's never the idea. But what I do want people to realize is that, like, everything is connected. And, like, even like you said there about going to the toilet is one of the most important things that we should do for a female. Well, that already relates back to everything that Holly was saying as well. And then you touch on stress, which you just introed Meg's perfectly for us.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, I think it's so important in that tightness of the pelvic floor. And I had no idea that this was so important. And helping myself go to the toilet is so important. I had none of that, and I just don't think we're spoken enough about it. So Victoria, I know that you are based in Exeter, but you do see people online, is that right?
Yes, yeah, I can see people online, and I do my pelvic floor reminders over Instagram. So it's probably, I think, easiest to find me on Instagram, because then I can pest everybody every day about the pelvic floor exercises. And that's the biggest battle. So it's actually doing them. Because I think we've all got an idea of how to do a squeeze, but if we can do them at least once a day, great. 3 times for a gold star under the Royal College of Obstetrician and Gynecologist guidance. But, once a day, great. Yes, you can find me. I'm Victoria_postpartum_physio. And then my blog's linked through my bio, which is where I talk about all my experiences. Because I think it becomes very interesting when you are on the receiving end of being that person in clinic that's sat there having a really rough time. And that's why I wrote the blog, because that was me. That was me 6-7 years ago, and it was hard. So I wanted to be honest about it.
Yeah, that must have been, I guess, yeah, you can learn so much, but actually, like, the school of experience as well is game changing, isn't it?
Very much so. Very, very humbling, and it makes you appreciate how hard it is to walk through the doors of clinic, or how hard it is to have that online consultation and say, I'm really struggling with this, and it's not making me happy, and I need some help. That's a big deal, and I've been there. It's hard.
Yeah, Victoria, thank you so much. If anyone, we've got maybe like 3 minutes, if anyone's got any questions for Victoria. If not, then I shall bring Megs into the room. Holly, I know there are a couple of questions there. If you know, like there's one that might be a quick response. If you don't mind just replying in the chat quickly, just if you don't mind. But yeah, Victoria, thank you so much. If any other questions do come through, I'll ping them to you. I know you obviously got the kiddies, so if you have to go, there's no pressure, but of course you're more than welcome, and we'd love you to stay if you can.
That's just some regulation now, so I can regulate.
Yeah, but like what Victoria was saying about how, you know, we're all so stressed. Megs, please come and join us. I will do a little bit of a personal intro for people that don't know. I started working January 24.
Yeah.
So I was pregnant, and I was not quite sure how I was gonna really cope with it. I'm a type A personality, like a lot of you are on here. If you suffer from hypothalamic amenorrhea, if we say we're gonna do something, we're not just gonna do it, we're gonna do it. And probably tip over a little too far and maybe edge towards burnout and refractory leisure period. And I started working with Megs, and then I had my little boy, and then went through a bit of a postpartum stage and crawled out of postpartum, going, you know, like in the films when they're like, save me. I was like that to Megs, and back into her DMs, like, Megs. And I would actually say this time round, so I started working with Megs in January. We did 8 weeks, then we did another 8 weeks, like quite intense work. I don't know whether, I can't really remember January. I know what we did was working. I 100% that this has been completely life-changing for me. When I say she has pieced my brain back together and has pieced my nervous system back together, truly remarkable. So Megs is a hypnotherapist, stress expert, and healer. Aren't you really? Do you have a professional way of, like, how would you introduce yourself professionally?
I'm a certified and registered hypnotherapist and also a coach. So that's my main line. I come from an integrative history of body work, as I trained as a professional dancer, and was very privileged to work with kind of global performance, body, brain experts and specialists, because I trained through the Conservatoire of Arts, which, like, in terms of quality, is the best place to be. So from the age of 18 back in 1999, I was very much gearing myself to understand the body-brain connection hugely. Prior to dance college and gaining that scholarship, I actually struggled with major burnout and got diagnosed with chronic fatigue at 15 as a high-performing, undiagnosed neurodivergent. That anything where people were just basically in burnout were just given this chronic fatigue label, really, in the late 90s. And so I was very lucky to have a mum that thought out of the box for the 90s. And so I was having nutritional checks, working with holistic therapies, very much kind of along the lines of looking at the gait, the way I walked, and all kinds of things. So I was exposed to really quite innovative ways of working with the body and brain from a really young age. And so as I trained as a dancer, I became very hyper focused on performance and performance inhibitors, and stress became a major part of that. And obviously, being in the dance world, I was exposed to all kinds of stresses, from disordered eating through to panic attacks, anxiety attacks. And so my career very much took a route into helping people behind the scenes as much as actually performing myself. And so I went into working with trainee actors and performers, and originally as a graduate, and then I experienced hypnosis myself, and it literally changed things very, very quickly for me. And I was like, I have to go and do this myself. And so hypnotherapy became something that really became a tool to not only fast track process, but the regulation that I started to feel in my body was very different than anything else I'd experienced holistically or through nutrition support before. And what I realized is with hypnotherapy is that essentially, in layman's terms, the grey matter in our brain can shift if you have qualitative hypnotherapy. And the grey matter is responsible for the wondrous things like our focus, our emotional regulation, critical thinking, creativity, innovation, all of these elements. So not just the very, very basis of our emotional regulation, but our hyperextended levels of consciousness and our ability to contribute and perform into life. And so I became really a specialist within my community of supporting people that were initially feeling very emotionally dysregulated and were really feeling that they'd lost a sense of self-control, whether that was in personal, professional, or both parts of their life. And the hypnotherapy became a tool really to support people that were going through medium and chronic stress states, and helping them reset their nervous system, learn how to do it themselves when they were dysregulated, when life happens, because we live in a very stressful modern world, right? And so that, yes, I help them get into that state, but also then giving them the tools for them to support themselves as they go from beyond working with me, really. And so, yeah, it's just become a very powerful process of people that have been through chronic health problems. Like my clients have often had struggles with periods, fertility, insomnia, digestive matters, Crohn's disease. And the correlation is that the body under that much stress, it also means that their motivation or reliance on things like exercise, their relationships, obviously, because we're all interconnected, it kind of spirals everywhere. And so very often what happens is we focus the hypnotherapy not on, say, I want to change the way I eat, but working with the nervous system first and teaching the body brain connection and the neural circuitry in the body actually how to fire differently than working from a medium to chronic stress state, being like I'm running from that saber-toothed tiger. What found in the practice is that the struggles on the surface part of life that people think is the problem isn't. So when we work with the nervous system first, we then can actually work through the other elements of life, but with the foundation and the seed of the nervous system working with and for us, and the body and brain, which when the grey matter when you have this qualitative hypnosis and the grey matter starts to shift in the body, our ability to our interoceptive sensitivity, so our ability to read signals between the body and brain increases, which means that our body brain connection, our body awareness of health issues, health struggles, signals that we maybe commonly very often as busy women like bypass and don't even realize, from even thirst cues to period pains and all of those things, which is often why somebody mentioned earlier, like, why are they feeling worse before they get better? Is that actually if you're starting to regulate, for example, through nutrition, if your interoceptive sensitivity, because your nervous system is starting to feel safe through regular food, your sensitivity will increase, your body awareness. So you may be picking up on tiredness or other symptoms that you were bypassing before, because stress is blocking that signaling system. And so that often there's this murky, I call it like the sediment at the bottom of a red wine bottle, that as your nervous system starts to regulate, you will feel that, because your actual sensitivity and awareness grows. And for a time, we have this murky time where we're like, everything feels worse. But it's actually because you're no longer in just a freeze state where you're just functioning and getting on with life, but your awareness is heightening.
I think I said to you, didn't I? Maybe on a voice note one time, I was like, Megs, when is this onion ever gonna stop peeling? And it feels like, and it, like you say, it does go back to that question of feeling worse. I remember it so clearly with HA. When I had HA, is the reason why so many people, me included, stay in that like quasi recovery. So you're like half in, half out, half, is because it feels really shit. It's the same, like Megs, there's so many times that, you know, some of the things that we work through, and girls, let me tell you, how I handle situations now, how I handle work still amazes me on a daily. How I look back at how I used to handle situations compared to how I handle now, and I'm like, Look at me go. Whether that's saying no more and being calm about it, or whether it is just feeling like there's elements that I find throughout every single day where I feel my nervous system's different. And but you have to go through the stickiness. You've got to peel the layers, right? You've got to release everything. And I don't know if anyone is a little bit like spiritual or open to sort of self-development on there, but there was so many areas where I was having to, like, you have to sort of deep dive, maybe under your example as well, Megs, get rid of the sediment, bring it all up to then get released, and then you go deeper again, and then you bring up a little bit more. Megs, could you explain what are some of the signs that our nervous system is distress regulated? We can pretty much guarantee that if we've got hypothalamic amenorrhea, our nervous system's dysregulated because the stress hormone is basically telling our brain, not happening here, you're not safe enough. But for maybe other people that, what are some of the common signs and symptoms that you see
of dysregulation?
Yes, please.
Okay, so sleep is obviously a really good place to start. Very often people might feel that they're getting hours of sleep, and whatever they get is still not enough. And so there's this kind of just heaviness like that, very constant, which is associated to obviously other things. We need to be really clear that these symptoms can cover other things as well. But like heaviness in the limbs, cold hands, cold feet. So that's giving us signals in terms of your circulation system is working from a fight or flight response rather than a regulated response. Headaches, migraines very commonly are related to chronic stress, again, based on how our body is prioritizing circulation in the circulatory system. Like I mentioned, the disappearance of certain cues. So that's a lot of people's hunger, for example, might shut down. Unless often as a child, if you were in a home where if bad things or hard times happened, you were like, let's all sit down and make a cake and have it together, or let's have a big family meal. So food becomes more of a comfort element. Then that often doesn't happen for clients like that are in chronic stress. But for a lot of people that are in medium to chronic stress and you're dysregulated, your hunger signaling, so that interoceptive sensitivity of reading the body's cues and signals disappear. Also awareness of things like injuries. You can go one way or the other, which is that you become hypersensitive because the skin is an organ and it has sensors all over it. And so if we're in a chronic stress state, what can happen is that the skin becomes very sensitive. So for example, that can mean that if your partner goes to touch you at the end of the day and to give you a hug or to attempt to be intimate, that it can almost make some people like jump out of their skin and they're like, get off, like, what are you doing? Because that you're in that dysregulated state. Or the opposite, that people can become very numb to physical sensation. So actually they feel a bit like separated from connection. They might not be aware. I had one client who actually had had a broken collarbone their entire, like from a toddler, but hadn't known about it. We started to do regulation work and stress releasing work through the hypnosis, and then suddenly they're like, my collarbone's really hurting. They went to a specialist and it turned out actually it'd been misplaced since their childhood, but they'd become numb inside to some of the pains of their childhood, that the body actually, the neural circuitry had began to bypass the senses because they were in a freeze response internally.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah,
isn't it? Because I've noticed throughout pretty much all the time that I've worked with you, we're always telling ourselves stories.
mm-hmm.
And you were able in working together, you were able to head to those stories, and if I remember rightly, it was like you would get me to picture how that felt and what area that was in the body as well. So can you talk us through a little bit about how our thoughts and our emotions are stored within the body, and also how our past is? Because we hear that a lot as well in therapy. You see a lot of therapists go back to our childhoods, don't you? But I remember us doing a lot of that, like, okay, if I've got a particular thought, maybe it's around food or whatever, like you always took me back further. When was the first time and where did I feel that? Could you explain that a little bit?
So whatever your health condition, for all of you that are listening, like, we are basically influenced from the moment that we know now through science, it's not just from when we're born, even the ancestral line of how our family processes stress, and all kinds of elements come through us when we're even being made in our mum's stomach. So like, literally, we have something called the implicit memory store, which, if you like, is, in very much layman's term, is this store bank in our system that associates a memory or a perception or a situation with all the sensory contributors of a moment. So, for example, I use the example that if somebody maybe is sad and they're like, oh, I want to cook everyone a happy meal and I want to do all of that. The reason is that if as a child that happened to you, you had a bad day and your mum's like, right, come on, let's make this and we'll cook bread and we'll do this stuff. Your implicit memory store associates and interlinks everything that comes into play in that moment. So when I'm sad, people will help me. Great. When I'm sad, if I make things and bring people together, I'll feel happier. When I'm sad, my belly feels better if I put food in it. And so you can see that there'll be all these mixed senses. And then what happens is our ability, fragrances then contribute. So, like if you go past someone and they've got a perfume or aftershave of someone you've dated before and you're like, whoa, like I haven't thought that person forever. Like, that's the same thing. So that lives in your implicit memory store. And that, our body brain is so bloody clever because it's storing all of these things for you. So when I can bring somebody through, I use obviously hypnosis to shift your state of consciousness to go into what we call the theta state, which is where the mind opens up and becomes more expansive and the linear logical brain, the conscious brain, closes down for us. We can open that store and it shows us and tells us what's interlinked. So, for example, I had a client who dad was very forceful in the way she ate as a toddler. And so her implicit memory store associated healthy, nourishing, home cooked food with a loss of control, pressure and force. And she was 2 years old. But actually what we were able to do is to teach her brain that home cooked food was nothing to do with her control. It just happened to be something that was there when she was in this battle with her father over food as a child. And so that when we can shift that neural circuitry, what happens is she comes out and suddenly we've taught the neurocircuitry in the body to not now fire nourishing, healthy, gorgeous food. Unprocessed food is not like associated with your dad and what the relationship you had. It's actually really good for you to have that, and that the processed food that you're choosing was basically that to her dad, but it was so ingrained from her childhood. And so that for everybody there's we've all got those, right? But sometimes it's just that they can escalate. And in this client's case, she was suffering from Crohn's very, very badly, and she's now in remission. But a lot of her food choices, which obviously Holly's area, is that her inflammation was coming from the types of nourishment that she was, and she was in a chronic heightened stress state because her brain was in constant fear that people were going to take her control away. So when we taught her body in the brain that how to have control, and she wasn't under threat, she is safe now, along with the shifts then in her associations with food, her system became more regulated, her inflammation went down, and the Crohn's treatment thankfully worked really, really powerfully.
And I think this is the thing that gets me, right? Many things get me actually around women's health, but one of the things that really gets me is that you've got one end of the spectrum of society saying, oh, we've got so many obese people in the world and rah, 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 they should just go on a diet, they should just lose weight. And then you've also got us HA campers that's like maybe taking it a little bit too extreme. Maybe we've been sucked down diet culture. Everyone's just saying like, well, just eat more. Like, just don't exercise. And I think like we're really forgetting that we can fill ourselves with, and I'll bet there's some of you on here, you know, that trend on Instagram that's like things I would say to you if I wasn't afraid to hurt your feelings. I'm about to call some of you out. You're on here because you want more information, but actually you've got all the information. It's up here, and it's the safety within you that's stopping you make those changes. And I think it's really that's why I get really frustrated when I see personal trainers online that are just like, just do this, don't understand why you can't just do this. And it's so much more complex than that, isn't it? Because mine was all about control. Really, my food was all about the fact that I get to choose to do this, I get to do this, and also that striving for perfection, because if I was really perfect in this, I'm going to be so loved, because look at how perfect I am in this. And I think often we're not looking at that holistically and looking deeper into, okay, why am I not having a period? What does having a period mean for me? Is it weight gain? Okay, what do I think about weight gain? Why is weight gain seen as bad? You and I, we did that whole process, didn't we? We did, like, why was it so bad that what would being fat, quotation marks, what does that mean to me, and where did I see that in my body?
Yeah. And I think the conditioning that women have from like the moment, you know, they're exposed to media, even their families, you know, very often when I'm working with clients, like even the way the grandparents will praise certain people at family events on their size or what they're wearing. And people learn very, very quickly in this circuitry in our brain that we see the whole world with, like where you fit into it and what puts you in some form of pecking order. And so that's why in terms of with periods, you know, and if you find yourself, you know, over exercising, but you can't stop, I think the really powerful thing, for example, is to understand and to unshame ourselves in that the brain is ever only making choices that it really believes is to your greatest good. And those circuitries that dominate, like we have evidence that something's got better for it. And so what's really powerful is when you find spaces where people actually help you rather than apologize or go, I need to fix this or I need to resolve this, is that if we can actually understand what's firing in that circuitry, there's not a hypnosis that I've ever done where even the part that the client comes thinking it's this awful, nasty part of them or this weak part of them, there's always a really, really good intention. Like the example I use, that somebody was eating, you know, really processed foods to the detriment of psoriasis, eczema, as well as Crohn's, like all of these things. And actually, it came from this really powerful need for her to go, I need autonomy. I need to control myself. I need to choose. And when you do that, it suddenly unshames the behavior and it loses its power and control over you, because then you can separate the emotional links and the cognitive, the behavioral parts of what you're doing. And you can then very systematically set for yourself what it is you want from here. And so those that find not exercising difficult, like your brain has evidence right now that is a way that it helps you reach a goal that your brain believes in. And so when we can become into a regulated state, we become more rational. So that's where hypnosis is very powerful, rather than just talking coaching or therapy, is that you have the power of these conversations in a very regulated state. So you're not talking from fear or fight or flee or those responses. You're actually talking from regulation. And when we're in regulation, we see things differently, right? So those
Definitely.
deep rooted patterns is just so important. And I think very often when something has a health label, we're like, oh, these are the good bits, or these are like the really negative bits, we've got to fix these and all of this stuff. And you know, and I think both, like the way that Holly and Victoria spoke, is that all of us are signaling, like, your body is an incredible system, and your brain is, and it requires nourishment externally and internally from your internal power in your body. And then the food or the other methodologies, the exercises you do, have this power to support your nervous system and to support you. But we don't live in a world where somebody calmly puts their hand on our shoulders and go, it's fine that you feel like this, let's work through it together. It's like, you know, me and my clients, we call it the EastEnder effect, or like the Hollyoaks effect, which is that something happens and it becomes 9 times out of 10 a massive drama, which actually causes your dysregulation to spiral, rather than stress actually requires restraint and support and kind of safety in being distressed to then become regulated, if that makes sense.
Really does. Yeah. If let's just assume we're all a little bit dysregulated here. What are some of the things that we could do for ourselves daily?
Okay, so I want to really make clear, because, you know, Instagram is full of kind of people wafting through meadows and grounding and doing these lovely things. And, you know, I posted about grounding intentionally this morning in my stories, but I gave a bit of science behind it, because, you know, on the surface it looked like, well, I went for a walk and I still feel shit. Like, great, it works for everybody else and not for me. So the first important thing is that we acknowledge that we're dysregulated, and some people will be dysregulated, will have been for a short period of time. Something will have triggered that. Other people, we come in and out, and other people will be in medium to chronic stress a lot of the time. And if you're susceptible to burnout or insomnia, those things, then there's a good chance that you're in that place. And so we want to give ourselves some credit for that. And actually, we want to just be like, I'm actually in a place where I'm in a bit of stress right now, and I'm going to give myself some grace for that, rather than fight it.
And we've spoken about that before, haven't we? Where like I would be like, and this and this and this. Oh, and I hate the fact that I'm stressed. Oh, I hate the fact that and Meg's has literally just gone to me, should we just accept it?
And it sounds really silly, but like sometimes we shame ourselves for feeling it, but we live in this modern world that is like this. So actually, if we go, right, we can come in and out of regulation. So what you can do is, they're called glimmers in psychology, is that if you're into your love languages, that's quite a good way to do it, is to even just additionally have this sprinkle of brilliance, a list of brilliance of things that intercept and pattern interrupt your stress cycle in your day. This is not going to suddenly mean that you wake up skipping and through. This is a stress management strategy to help you not feel so full at the end of the day. And it's really important to be clear on that. So that by having regular food, by strengthening your body, working your body from a wellness capacity, allowing recovery time in your day. Recovery generally isn't just sitting on the sofa scrolling, and everybody shames it. There's nothing wrong with it, but that is not recovery time for your brain or your body, your muscles. So the way stress is most powerfully weakened in your body is to pattern interrupt it, and I call them pit stops. So exactly like Victoria said, if you can do 3 times a day, this isn't to kind of like add stuff to do, it's for you to find something that makes you feel like you've had an oxygen mask put on, is the way I describe it. So I don't want you to go like, I've got to get up at 7 a.m. and suddenly do 50 things to regulate. You're not going to be regulated if you're approaching it from that way. But finding the things that make you breathe slower. You can track somebody's regulation by the amount of breaths, very generally, that they take in a 60-second period. So, you know, if you're under 7 or 8 breaths per minute, we know that actually your body is functioning in that moment at quite a deep, slow, steady space, which means the body is clearly getting, you know, its message that actually, you know what? I feel safe right now.
So I just felt my breath go. I don't know if it's your voice, Megs, whether I'm used to listening to it in the hypnosis, but like every time I hear you, I'm just like, oh. But
it very much is with all my clients. Like I give them hypnosis or little laser audios to listen to, that if you can interrupt that stress cycle, that speed, and I've intentionally slowed my voice as I say it right, we all start to suddenly go, oh, I'm not in a rush. And so if you can pit stop yourself 3, 4, 5 times a day, like before you go to work, in the middle of the day, get outside between 3 and 5 p.m, even for 10-15 minutes, and just sit on a bench, push your feet into the floor, and just take some deep breaths without spending a penny on anyone to support you. Listening to healing hertz music, like relaxation music, whilst you do that, has a really great influence. And when you get home from work, giving yourself these pockets, these sprinkles to reset your system on a real basic, that's going to help you, because when your nervous system starts to practice slowing down, it gives you to catch a breath. And on a very basic term of regulation, we need to breathe. The other thing that I would recommend is there's loads of hypnosis and healing music on YouTube and Spotify for absolutely free. Like, if you can find a hypnosis that takes you into a deep relaxation, and if anyone's got any questions, I'll happily share with you guys too. Some of mine is that when you go into hypnosis, you shift your state of consciousness. So you work through the states of consciousness. And when you get into theta state, which is where we aim to be in hypnosis, what happens is our whole system basically surrenders, which is when your body goes heavy, you feel relaxed, you feel zen, you feel light. Everybody has that capability to do that. If you can practice doing that with a recording, your brain starts to understand that this is a state I can function at and be in, not just when I'm in hypnosis. So if you speak to somebody that is hypnotizable, like individuals that have been very often people that are hypnotherapists, like I can like get myself into that state, not because it's magical, but because I practice it. And so it's a state that we can get our body, if we know what regulation is, a bit like when we do the blueberry and we practice that motion, or we know when suddenly we're eating prior to being starving and our body feels good and grateful for that. If we practice shifting our consciousness state and being regulated, guess what happens in day-to-day life? The body and brain starts to bring regulation, which is what you experience, into your daily life when you used to lead through the eyes of stress and panic.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on it, like, you know, where we keep going back to those couple of questions at the start about like feeling worse at the start. I would say that to start with, it feels boring.
Yeah. So there's no dopamine here.
Yeah, and like I am, like we've spoken about it, I love a dopamine hit, whether that's posting on Instagram and seeing people engage with it, whether it's starting a business, doing this. It's why openly I talk about how I really struggled with the newborn phase.
Yeah.
What do they do? What I'm like, where's the dopamine? And I found that when it first started to calm, is I was like trying to like find the drama in my life. I was trying to find, because I found it quite boring. But I guess that is the sticky bit. That's the like exhaustion and the tiredness and the gut feeling really bloated as you've increased your food, part of healing.
Yeah.
But over the side of it, I mean, like, you know, it's a Wednesday. Me and Frankie went to the park twice today. We went on a nice long walk, and there was no guilt, no checking my phone constantly, no. And I can't. You have to go through the stickiness. You have to go through the boredom to be able to come out the other side, and you have to do the weird stuff that doesn't seem right, you know, finding those little pockets, doing the deep breathing, committing to the hypnosis. You have to do those things. You have to commit to it for you to see the meadow over the other side.
And sometimes you will do a practice and you'll feel like incredible at the end of it, but most of the time, like, regulation is a pretty chilled place. So like, we're not used to that in the way that the world works now, right? So we have to teach our body that regulation, and it's a quieter place because the mind isn't firing. The body is kind of, you know, not overactive or activated, and the muscles aren't firing from tension. So actually it becomes a place where people are like, okay, what now? But what happens is, as you reduce your stress levels in your body, the grey matter in the brain is shifting. What also starts to happen is your benchmarks start to shift. But the best bit is you can't release happy hormones and cortisol like at the same time. Like, just the brain, it doesn't work like that, right? So actually, as you're not suddenly releasing stress, you have this little pocket where you're not releasing stress, but you're like, what happens now? And then that's when we start to really introduce the concept of, how do you get your oxytocin? How do you get your dopamine? How do you get your serotonin? And suddenly you start layering in your life like a new system in the brain that's always been there, that we have to just teach it to remember that. Did you know that when your stories were perfect today, when you give someone a compliment out of surprise, you release dopamine for them and you, and the buzz you get from that is a bigger buzz than what you got from stress. But to do that stuff, we have to lower, if it was in a test tube, the stress levels and the firing system first. And too often on social media, everybody's talking about, let's do this and we'll feel good. But it's like, you can't do that if you've got stress fueling your body yet. So we have to go at it at a slow, you know, a lot of my job is just getting people to be slower and steadier, and to be patient with that journey. You know, I'm working with a guy training to be an Ironman at the moment, and the swimming, he's got some real blocks in, and you know, as well, and doing these exercises that really are not giving him the dopamine of doing an Ironman. But it's like, you're not doing this for the dopamine hit, you're doing this for the bigger picture, and the repetitions and the consistency is, you just have to trust in that process, that it's going to lead you to the other side. But sometimes we have to step into the unknown to get to it, and that really, with any of these processes, I'd imagine with Victoria and Holly, is like, it's not sexy dopamine hits all the time, it's these little tweaks and these adjustments. And you know, for me, hypnotherapy was a very powerful way that I could help people get into a regulated state, to learn that first, and we can shift the neural circuitry. But without that, you can do it very, very powerfully by yourself and steadily. You know, I was a single mum in 2012 with no money, and I just listened to recordings because I couldn't afford my own hypnotherapist, and that got me through some really, really tough times. And we are surrounded by free resources that you can use if you want to go down that route.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. So guys, as a little gift, no, it's not even a little, there's a huge gift actually. So as you know, I have done 8 weeks intensive with Megs, and part of that I got my own hypnosis. Megs has actually written us all on this workshop an incredible script and hypnosis to gift us all, which, you know, yes, there's lots on YouTube, but this is one written to help us bridge the gap. And when we talk about bridging the gap, especially in hypothalamic amenorrhea, you can do all of the physical things, you can do all of the, you know, eating carbohydrates, eating your good fats, eating, but if you're doing it from a state of stress and you're not addressing the thoughts and how you're feeling about yourself, you're going to either bounce straight back, you're going to delay recovery, or you're never going to quite get to where you want to be, because there's always going to be something holding you back. I'm now working with Megs on other things that are holding me back from reaching things that I want to reach. There's always, if you're not getting a goal, there's always a story probably that you're telling yourself. So yeah, Megs has kindly done this incredible hypnosis for us all, which we will share once it's done. But I would really encourage you, alongside your physical, whether that's postpartum, menopause, general balance in hormones, or hypothalamic amenorrhea, all of those physical things that we do to look after our bodies, please do like take advantage of this hypnosis that Megs has done, because that mindset change is going to be the one thing that, you know, stops us tearing our bodies apart when we look at it in the mirror. You know, not beating ourselves up when we have to change, or if a certain piece of clothing doesn't fit us anymore, will enable us to eat out and not worry about the calories, will enable us to say yes to the cake and not stress about it because it's a Wednesday at 2 p.m. and not a Saturday at 6 p.m. Like, it committing to that mindset stuff is the things that's going to make the physical stuff that little bit easier. And also, the people that are struggling where they feel worse, committing to that mindset stuff, that getting you over that extra hurdle that mindset stuff is going to get you over that hurdle. So Megs, thank you so much for doing that for us.
Pleasure. Can I just say that I might go away and just add a little, because obviously hearing people's questions, it's really helpful because my brain's going, I want to change that sentence. So I might have to go away and do that. But I just want to say that if you're going to say anything to yourself when you're in a state of spiraling, allowing yourself to feel safe and to be spiraling is a bit of a contradiction for the brain, but a very powerful one. Is that if you can practice that when you are feeling dysregulated, or you're feeling concerned about food or your clothes choices or whatever it is, all the things that you just mentioned, Chloe, is getting into the practice that if you're taking those pit stops throughout the days, then in the moments where you are spiraling and you do them, they will anchor you back to how you felt because of that implicit memory store and what we spoke about earlier. So teaching yourself, like, I'm learning to feel safe, everything's going to be okay, I've got my back. This self-talk in those moments, which if you didn't have a parent that talked to you in those ways as a child, you won't have naturally. And that's where the language in the hypnosis is super powerful. Now, some people, just as a note, aren't recommended to do hypnosis. If you're not sure, you can contact me or speak to your health advisor or doctor. But if you have an epilepsy diagnosis, experience any concerns with personality disorders, dissociation, bipolar, that kind of thing, it's not recommended unless it's specifically written for you by someone that is experienced in doing it. I do work with people with those things, so if you do have questions, come and see me, but I will always also advise that you speak to a doctor first. A lot of people don't say that, and they should. So please just make sure that you look after yourself before you practice, so that you make sure that you're giving your brain the support that it really needs.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I feel all nice and calm now. I feel like I'm ready for bed. Once Megs has done her tweaks and her little thing to the hypnosis, I will make sure I send it to all of you, on the exception that you all promise to do it. Do you recommend regularly, like 21 day every day for 21 days, was it?
So you can choose to do it. It really depends on your personality. If you're somebody that likes to kind of commit and require a daily routine, like I'm somebody that does that, I find a time and it's like, you know, I'll do it each time. Whereas other people like a bit of variety. So actually choosing to do it a couple of days a week can be really beneficial. Obviously, the more you do it intensively, you're going to reap, your brain's going to get that recognition of what messages are coming through with that. I will also be attaching a morning script, which is something that you can read in your mind, like if you're on the bus or commuting to work, or out loud to yourself. And if you can do that in the first half an hour of waking, your neural circuitry is really susceptible to the changes that you make. And that's also for anyone that is concerned if they can't practice hypnosis, they'll have that as well. But yeah, if you can do it every day for 21 days, then, you know, great. If not, pick one night a week where you're like, I'm going to go and do that before work, or like evening when I get in, or before work, and just stick to it. And you know yourself best, what suits you, but don't set yourself up to not be able to do it, because then you'll just shame yourself.
Yeah. And if at any point that you don't say you commit to every day and you don't do it one day, you're still a legend. Don't worry about it. Just move on from it. The world
shall not end.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, again, if you've got any other questions for Holly, Megs, or Victoria, feel free to DM me as well. And all of the other questions in the chat, we'll try and get those answers to you. I'll share them all in follow-up emails as well. I've also got some discount codes from brands that really want to give to you, so I'll send that all into an email as well. But thank you all for joining. I mean, I've loved it. I could keep going on and on and on, but I know that's not wise because Frankie's going to get me up about 5 a.m. So I should probably think about heading to bed. But thank you all for joining, but especially a huge thank you, Holly, Megs, Victoria. Thank you so much. Just quickly, actually, Megs, where can people find you to come and work with you? Sorry.
Oh no, you're so good because I never do that bit. Okay, so I'm on Instagram just as Megs Sharland, which is my name at the bottom here, or my website is megsharland.com, and there's a contact form that you can get in touch, but DMs on Instagram is absolutely fine. I welcome that, so that's all good.
Amazing. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for taking your time out to help us all bridge the gap between ourselves and our bodies. But yeah, it's been fantastic. So thank you so much. I shall let you all go and enjoy your evening. I hope you had dinner before you came on, or if you were watching, you were able to eat while watching. I'm gonna head to bed. Thank you so much. See you later. Thank you. Big kisses. Can I stop recording?